Today we will be listening to another installment of Sherlock Holmes, the Civil War detective. In this episode, we follow Holmes in The Serial Killer of 1863. We start in Holmes's office. She walked into my office like someone who's not loitering, with a purpose. I knew this was gonna be one of the biggest cases of my life. So, what are you doing in this part of town?
I know my Uncle Obie Jenkins was wrongfully convicted, but nobody can hear me out. That's why I came to you.
Well, you've come to the right place. What information can you give me?
Not much. All I know is that a string of murders occurred and that my uncle was in the wrong place at the wrong time. You have to help me.
We'll have to retrace the murderer's steps and the key locations of the investigation to see if we can find any clues. Let's go. We don't have that much time to waste. Meanwhile, in an unknown location. Please, let me go. Shut up, old man. You're never escaping. Holmes and Jenkins walk into the signing room of the Emancipation Proclamation. This was the first spot mentioned in the case file. I say we at least check the area for any clues before we go to any of the other locations.
Okay.
Wait a second. I found a discarded letter in the trash that looks like it was from the murderer. It also looks like it was meant for someone, maybe an accomplice.
What? 2 murderers?
Possibly. Either way, the murderer was in this room when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and based on this handwriting, it was definitely not Obie.
Then we should inform the police right away.
They won't believe us. Unless
what?
Unless we capture the actual murderer. This is it.
This is what?
The spot where General Joseph Hooker was appointed commander of the Army of the Appomattox while replacing Burnside. This gives Burnside reasonable motive, making him a possible suspect.
Should we interrogate him?
Not without knowing how he did it and when. Motive alone isn't good enough. Meanwhile, in the same unknown location. Why are you doing this? Oh, you'll see. They'll all see! General Grant and his army are capturing Vicksburg right now, which means the murderer's attention should be off us or any of our activity.
That new draft that has been enacted means that my husband has to go off and fight in the war. We don't have the 300 to pay them off. I'm scared. I'll be all alone. What if the murderer knows that we're trying to find him? What if he comes after me?
Don't worry about a thing, miss. This person doesn't know a thing about our investigation. You have nothing to worry about. However, these clues have been so easy, it makes me think we're missing something.
What do you mean?
What if he's trying to throw us off his trail? What if... No. That's just fear talking. Logic tells me that he was upset like you, Miss Rachel, about the draft that has recently been enacted. What if he was drafted and didn't want to go? That must be it. We must make haste.
I'm starting to question our suspects.
Now why is that, Mr. Holmes?
General Joseph Hooker's troops were just recently defeated by General Lee's much smaller force at the Battle of Chancellorsville in Virginia. Confederate General Stonewall Jackson was wounded by his own soldiers. Hooker's force had no other choice but to retreat. This means that any of our previous suspects would have not had the time to plant these clues. This further proves that it must be someone who had a problem with authority.
So where do we start now?
I say we go to all the places in the case file and find all the decoy clues. Maybe they will lead us to the real clues. Act natural. We are at the funeral of Stonewall Jackson.
What? We're in Confederate territory? We could be killed.
I said act natural. Act like you're my servant. The only reason we are here is to question a select few soldiers about what happened and what they were doing during the Battle of Stonewall Jackson was shot in.
How did you narrow hundreds of soldiers down to a few?
Simple. I looked at the attack plan and found which soldiers were close enough to have an accurate shot at Stonewall. One of these men could possibly be our suspect. I'm starting to think that our suspect doesn't have it out for one particular side of the war. He just hates everybody involved. Today, General Lee, with 75,000 Confederates, launched his second invasion of the North, heading into Pennsylvania, in a campaign that will soon lead to Gettysburg. This could be a chance for him to strike again.
Meanwhile, in the same unknown location, those idiots, they will ruin everything. They're starting to catch on. I have to do something about this.
Mr. Helms, I was reading this newspaper from a little while ago and it said that President Lincoln appoints General George G. Meade as commander of the Army of the Potomac, replacing Hooker. Meade is the 5th man to command the army in less than a year. Does this sound like President Lincoln to you?
I'm not sure that has ever been done before. You have a point, Rachel.
I'm afraid that it's getting awfully late and I'm getting tired. I think I'll head home now.
Miss Jenkins had no idea what was waiting for her inside her empty house when she returned. You thought you could catch me? You'll never catch me.
Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?
Please, honey, this is much bigger than you, and I'm not finished yet. With your stupid old uncle in prison, nobody will ever suspect me.
Please don't do this.
The man in the mask inside Rachel Jenkins' home barely missed little Miss Jenkins' heart. The bullet was in her right shoulder. She managed to make it down to Sherlock Helms' office.
Mr. Helms, it was him, the man we're looking for. He was in my house. I said that if he wasn't done yet, nobody would ever suspect him.
Dear God, we need to get you some help. Mr. Helms grabs a first aid kit from a cabinet in his office and wraps her wound. The two get on a train that night and start heading for New York.
May I ask you something, Mr. Helms?
Anything.
Why are we going to New York?
None of the doctors in the South know what they are doing. My friend is a surgeon that specializes in shoulder work. He will have you feeling like new in no time. And plus, I believe that our suspect has business there. Can you tell me about what happened?
I walked into my house, and he was standing there with a gun in his hands. He was a tall man, but he had a mask on so I couldn't see his face. His voice was deep, but I'm sorry, that's all I remember before I got shot. Then he ran out. I don't know where he went after that.
Well, the tide of the war has just turned against the South as the Confederates were defeated at the battles of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania and Vicksburg. The last Confederate stronghold on the Mississippi River surrenders to General Grant and the Army of the West of the West after a 6-week siege. With the Union now in control of the Mississippi, the Confederacy is effectively split into, cut off from its Western allies. The suspect could be planning to do something to one of these men. We have to hurry.
Mr. Helms and Mrs. Jenkins make it to New York, but the anti-draft riots had already begun. Crime was everywhere, and blacks were targeting poor whites. At least 120 people, including children, have been killed, and $2 million in damage has been caused, until Union soldiers returning from Gettysburg restored order. Negro troops of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment under Colonel Robert G. Shaw assault fortified rebels at Fort Wagner, South Carolina. Colonel Shaw and half of the 600 men in the regiment were killed. The president meets with abolitionist Frederick Douglass, who pushes for full equality for Union Negro troops. At Lawrence, Kansas, pro-Confederate William C. Quantrill and 450 pro-slavery followers raided the town and butchered 182 boys and men. Death is everywhere.
We have to hurry to the hospital.
I don't know how much longer I can hold on.
Mr. Sherlock and Mrs. Jenkins make it to the hospital that night, and she got the surgery. Everything went well, and she was making a miraculous recovery within a few days.
How are you feeling today?
I'm doing okay. Can you hand me that newspaper?
Sure.
The newspaper read, September 19th through 20th, 1863. A decisive Confederate victory by General Braxton Bragg's Army of Tennessee at Chickamauga leaves General William S. Rosecrans' Union Army of the Cumberland trapped in Chattanooga, Tennessee, under Confederate siege. October 16, 1863. The President appoints General Grant to command all operations in the Western Theater. November 19, 1863. President Lincoln delivers a 2-minute Gettysburg Address at a ceremony dedicating the battle as a national cemetery. November 23 through 25, 1863. The rebel siege of Chattanooga ends as Union forces under Grant defeat the siege of General Braxton Bragg. During the battle, one of the most dramatic moments of the war occurs. Yelling, "Chickamauga, Chickamauga!" Union troops avenge their previous defeat at Chickamauga by storming up the face of Missionary Ridge without orders and sweep the rebels from what had been through to be an impenetrable fortress. "My God, come and see them run," a Union soldier cries.
I believe that our suspect is about to strike again.
Why?
Mr. President is in danger.
Mr. Helms leaves Mrs. Rachel at the hospital and heads to the White House. He busts down the door to find 2 people who look like Abraham Lincoln. "You are all the same. That's why I killed those people, and I impersonated Abraham Lincoln. I used to be his biggest fan, but then I was drafted into war by his act. I'm not going down without a fight."
Well, there's the confession.
Sherlock Holmes reacts quickly, shooting the gun out of Honest Abe's hand. Then, with another bullet, he pierces Honest Abe's heart. Honest Abe's knees buckle as he lets out his last breath. Abraham Lincoln was saved and fully recovered. Rachel Jenkins was reunited with her uncle Obie. Sherlock Holmes returned to his office, satisfied with another job well done.
You can buy the book copy of this story in any retail stores.